Pt2, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and this is the second part of my favorites video, of the first half of the year. So I wouldn't have talked about all of them in one video, but I got interrupted, and that's my fault because it was bad timing on my part. In my household things were going on, so I didn't get to finish talking about books, and I wanted to end it so that I wouldn't have to start over. So I need to, so I divvied up into a two-parter. So I'm divvying up into this two-part, a two-parter. So now we are on the second half where I talk about the favorites of April through June. Okay, so we are going to start with Stephen King's Christine. Okay, so I will say it again. I've already said it every time I talk about this book that I wasn't sure if I would like this one because I'm not a car person. But I very much enjoyed this. It was a great story. I should have known that I should have known because this is Stephen King. He does such great character work, and his stories are more than just their basic premise. And, even if it's normally something you wouldn't normally read, he pulls you in. He has a way to pull you in to the story and really get into it and like it and just really enjoy the characters, even the ones that are horrible people. Now, of course, I don't know if I will ever read. There are some of his books that I might never read, even if that's true, what I just said about Stephen King as a writer. There are just some stories that, at least as of right now, it doesn't hold my interest, which I realized that I didn't think this would, and it pulled me in. But I'm mainly thinking of books like his thrillers, like the Bill Hodges series. Like, I just have no interest about reading a detective chasing a serial killer. Even if it's Stephen King, written by Stephen King. But anyway, we're not talking about that. I was just putting that out there because if someone recommends it to me, it's like, nope. Even though I've said before that Stephen King has a way of pulling me in and I should trust Stephen King, there are limits. But what I like about this is that it looks at something that a lot of us can, and I'm sure, especially guys, I'm sure, but girls too, women too, relate to when you're a teen and you're desperate to be independent and to be grown up. The struggle of that, but also the insecurity of that, and feeling, you have this main character, Arnie, who feels repressed, and he loves his mom, and he cares about and respects his mom and his dad, but I'm sure there is desire for independence, and to not have to have this pressure put on to have the perfect grades, to get into college, and pressure of deciding what college to go to, and hoping that it's a college his mom approves of, and basically the struggle of trying to make sure he will continuously live under his mom, I can't think of the word, succeed his mom's expectations, live up to her expectations. And I think that's why he was susceptible to this car, because not only was he bullied in school, but he also had to deal with his mom, his very controlling mother, who I did feel sorry for later, because I think she had good intentions. She loved her son and wanted what was best for him, and the way she was raised by her father, that influenced how she raised her son. And I don't think she was a villain. I think she was just someone that made bad choices on how to raise her son, and was just so afraid of losing control of his life. And a parent shouldn't control their kid completely. They should let their kid, when they're old enough to take care of themselves and make their own decisions, give them a sense of freedom, give them freedom. Let them make their own choices. When you're a little kid, it's probably best if the parent guides their kid and kind of makes decisions for them, because they're little and they can't comprehend certain things and they don't understand certain things, and their brains are still absorbing and developing. So when little, but when they're Arnie's age, she shouldn't control him. But I think it's because she loved him, and it doesn't excuse it, but what I like about King is that he knows how to make you feel like about these characters that, okay, I don't like them and their decisions, but I can understand where they're coming from. Now, there's some characters that are just, like, you understand how they got corrupted, but it doesn't mean that they're still an evil person. But yeah, I understand why he was so susceptible, because this car was probably whispering sweet nothings and Disney was getting inside his head and was like, I'll give you your independence and freedom, which I think is what he desired. And also all of a sudden he's cool now. He's powerful. He can do anything. He feels invincible probably with Christine. And also you find out later that it's a little more than just Christine is getting inside his head. Someone else is getting inside his head that's connected to Christine. I also, the narrator, I really liked him. He was he's an example of a nice, good character that cares about his friend, loves his friend, but he does make decisions later in the story that some people would find questionable. Not everyone's going to agree with it. Not everyone's going to like it, like his decision, the decision he makes later. And also, like, Christine was kind of, kind of fun. Like, she was scary and intimidating, but also kind of fun in her, like, sinisterness and wickedness and just, like, the power she had. And this book is so creepy because there's at one point he's in the car with a bunch of ghosts, a bunch of dead corpses, and that was so creepy. And I would have loved to see that on screen, but they don't include that in the movie adaptation. Like I said, years ago, they were going to remake it. I don't know if that's still on the table. I mean, I hope it is, because there's stuff in here that I would love to see on screen. Now that the technology for making movies has improved a lot. And you can do even more. And of course, the dreaded CGI. I know people don't like CGI because it's overused and sometimes it just looks ridiculous at times. But yeah, one of the creepiest parts is with the ghost when the corpses are inside the car with him. That is so creepy, and I would love to see that on screen. Also, that one guy that I can't remember his name, the guy who gave him the car. He was also a creepy dude, and so, like, slimy. You just hate his guts, and he's just so unsettling. He's such a pig. He's a sexist pig, and you just can't stand him. And, like, so does have offered a lot of great things. It was so much fun. I know not everybody, and I know there are going to be people that are just not even if Stephen King's a good writer, no matter what, they're not going to like it. Like, I actually saw a review on Goodreads. It was like, they're also another car person, and it didn't matter who wrote it. They were not going to get past the car story, and it was silly to them. But to me personally, King can make something that, I mean, maybe on screen it might look silly. But I think King has a way to make something that would seem silly on the surface actually really creepy. Like, I could see where for some people a haunted car would be ridiculous. But, because, like, a lot of people make the joke of how you can just jump out of the way. If you don't get out of the way, you're dumb. But, I think he has a way of making something that seems, like, dumb. Like, the idea of, why didn't you just jump out of the way? But of course the car would chase people down, so. But yeah, this was really good. Okay, and then we have one of my 500 plus page novels I've been reading for a long time, and finally finished it in April. And that is Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens, and I love this. This was so good. I mean, I love almost everything that Stephen King writes. I mean, even Hard Times, it wasn't my favorite, but I still had a good time. It still left some thought thoughts in my head and interesting, and I almost am tempted to rebuy it, but and I might rebuy it and reread it, give it another shot. But anyway, we're here to talk about Dombey and Son. So this is not about Mr. Dombey or his son. This is about Mr. Dombey's daughter, Florence. So Mr. Dombey is a man. He owns this company, this business, and of course, like most, men, they want their son to inherit their business and take their place and represent them. And so he's hoping for a son, but he does have a daughter. He had a daughter, and he's like, what can I do with a daughter? What? She's not worth it. She can't take over my business. So he kind of ignores his daughter and is very dismissive of his daughter, Florence. And eventually his wife does have a son, but she dies giving birth to him. And Dombey is just doesn't care. All he cares about is that he has a son now, that he can pass on his legacy and his business, and he's so happy. But things with his son aren't exactly what he planned, what he had hoped for. His son does not live up to his expectations, but he still dotes on him, still tries his best to influence his son and make sure he falls in his footsteps, but doesn't go well. Meanwhile, you have Florence, who is so desperate to please her father and want her father's love, but she never gets it. And she's just struggling, and her only comfort is the people in her life that care about her. And, she is the kindest young woman on the planet. She is so sweet and caring to everybody. And, and easily makes friends and earns people's respect and love. And just, she's such a sweet girl, and she deserves to be loved, but she doesn't get the love from her father that she desperately wants. And it's about her. Dombey is on the peripheral. You go back and forth between him and her, and you see he's being influenced by others with sinister intentions who want to take his business from him and want to control him. And at one point he does give Florence a new mom. And she does like Florence, and her and Florence have a bond. They become very close, but she kind of resents being forced to marry Dombey because she feels like marriage to this man is a prison and an enslavement that was forced upon her by her mom. And it very much is a book about the struggles of women back then. It's a feminist book, and it's mixed with these colorful, outstanding characters that Dickens has had to create, and just so many. I mean, I love Captain Cuddle and his and I can't remember his name, but Florence's partner, her love interest, the young boy who, is her childhood best friend, and then leaves her and becomes a sailor for a little while, but then comes back into her life at one point. And her new stepmom, she's awesome. She's just a strong-willed character, and so and I love that she is so loving and kind and tries to be a mom to Florence, but she also struggles because she feels entrapped in this marriage now, and even though she didn't want it, she goes along with it because her mom forces her. And there's so many great characters, and like I said, it's a book about the struggles. It's a feminist book, and it's so great. It's such a great story, and it's one of my favorites so far of Dickens's work. And I was so happy that I finished it, because it's such a long book, and it feels like such a triumph that I finished it. I mean, any book this size when I finally finish them, I am very happy. I'm very proud of myself. But yeah, this is such a great story. I think it's definitely one of the Dickens books that I recommend people trying out. Not the first Dickens book you should read. I think I agree with Katie from Books and Things that you should read something like Great Expectations. Or maybe even some of his Christmas work, like A Christmas Carol. Because everyone knows Christmas Carol. You've probably seen an adaptation around Christmas time of A Christmas Carol. But it's called A Christmas Carol for a reason. So it might not be, it's not a story that you probably wouldn't feel the desire to read all year round. Although there is such thing as Christmas in July, apparently. But anyway, this was so good. I already want to reread it, but you know, it's a long book, so I will reread it at some point though. Okay, and then we have, it's gonna take a second because it's, okay, so I'm gonna slide these. Then we have another Filipino work of literature. This is Monsoon Mansion by Sanel Barnes. I'm assuming I'm saying her name right. I still have not heard her name said out loud, so I don't know if I'm saying this correctly. But this is a memoir, so it's nonfiction. And this young woman, Sanel Barnes, who is still, as she's on Instagram actually, and this book takes place in the 90s, I think, in the Philippines. And she was a woman who, her dad was a self-made businessman. He did business with the Middle East. Her mom was a socialite, and it's just her and her half-brother, her half-older brother, and because her dad did have another family somewhere else, and they had this wonderful life in this mansion. They were very happy. They had so much fun. They had this great life, this great, wonderful life. But then their dad's business starts kind of slowly trickling away. It starts falling apart little by little, and then a monsoon had happened, the rainy season, and they lose everything, and they have to basically sell a lot of their stuff. And her dad eventually leaves to deal with his clients, and her mom had already planned to leave because she blamed her father for the failure of the business. She also blames him because she was pregnant and lost her child. She had a stillbirth, I think, and so when Sanel's father leaves, this woman marries someone else, a guy who's is a little more greedy and selfish businessman, very wealthy, and he is a jerk and cruel to his new stepkids, almost abusive, and her fairy tale life is taken from her. In fact, her and her brother decide to try to start a new business. They come up with a business where they tour people around the Philippines. They taxi people around in their community, and it did not go well. And when their mom was at a weak moment because her stepfather is abusive to her, she is all apologetic to her kids and everything, to Sanel and her brother, and they tell her, in a moment of vulnerability, they tell her about this business that they have going on, and she betrays them, tells her stepdad, who takes it from them, and and they are forced to go back to school, which on the surface it seems like, oh, they go back to school, but he took it from their business, their hardworking, the money they earned. Their water is cut off because he doesn't pay things like the water bill, and Sanel has a miserable life. Has to do whatever she can to survive. I mean, even her stepbrother, her half-brother, leaves to go live with his biological mother, and it's just so heartbreaking to see Sanel struggle and what she has to do to survive, and being so young, and her complicated feelings towards her mother. I get the impression there's some resentment there, but she still loves her, still cares about her mom. And at one point, her mom tried to run away, but then her mom is too weak and goes back. And finally, at one point, Sanel, when she gets taken by her, she finally gets free and is rescued by her half-brother and his family. And it's such a sad story what she goes through. And it feels like, and it's sad because it's really happened to this woman who is, of course, now living a happy life. She lives in the States and is happily married, and just, she has a great life. I mean, she still struggles, but still has her struggles. I think she had I don't know if it was a brain aneurysm that that she, obviously survived and she's still trying to write, but she's very much has a hard time now, but she still has a good life, has her own daughter. And I gotta admit, I am curious, like, things like Mother's Day or her mom's birthday, like, does she still talk to her mother? And but anyway, it's so good. It's so good, but it's so heartbreaking of a story, and it might be hard to read for some people, and it makes you emotional. It can make you emotional, and it's just such a heart-wrenching story. And just all these stories I've read about the Philippines, like, so far there's only been a couple that I feel like are happy stories. Like, Arsenic and Adobo is somewhat, I mean, it still involves someone getting murdered and our main character being accused of it, but it does have a happy, hopeful ending. And it's kind of more of a, like, Agatha Christie-esque, happy, type mystery. And it's funny, too. And then, like, I'm trying to, well, at first I was going to say In the Country, but a lot of the stories still have a bitterness to them. There is a little bit of sadness. They're not as tragic. Not all stories are as tragic. I mean, some of them are, from what I remember, but like not all of them are. So it's kind of one that's in the middle, I feel like. I mean, Dusk had a sense of hopefulness by the end of it, I feel like, but then it gets back into books 2 and 3 where there's kind of a sad, complicated situation going on. But I mean, the Philippines had a rough, trying to figure out their identity and everything. And they were colonized 3 times essentially. But yeah, this is so good. So that's Monsoon Mansion by Sanal Barnes, and I hope you guys, if you guys, this sounds interesting. Hope this interests you, because I would love for you to support her as an author. And I definitely want to read. I think she also has poetry too. Like, I think she has other work or essays or something that that I would like to look into. Okay, so that was April, my favorites of April. So now we're into May, my birthday month. Which, again, for me, I didn't treat it like, I didn't specifically seek out books that I knew would be favorites. I just treated it like any other month of reading, whatever I was motivated to read, I read. So the first book I read in May was The Trial by Franz Kafka. And this was definitely an intriguing read. Basically, in this community, this German, I think he's a banker, he gets accused of something, he doesn't know what, and gets arrested and put on trial. And throughout the whole book, he's trying to find out from all these people that kind of like are under the thumb of the courts, how to deal with the courts, how to survive this trial, how is there a way for him to get out of the situation. He hires a lawyer, but he doesn't agree with his lawyer. So that becomes a complicated relationship, and I think there's a lot of doubt, niggling doubt from people, even his friends and family doubt, have this doubt if he's innocent or not. And I think it's a commentary on government and the government's approach to things, and it's an incomplete story, actually. There's a lot more in the story. That I think it's one of the ones that our narrator's friend, let's see if I can get his friend's name, that, don't you dare. Let me see. Let's see. I'm trying to find the friends. his friend Max something had this was one of his friend published this. Published this for him, even though he didn't want it, because I think his friend was like, this is good work and it should be published. So this was one of the ones that got, so this wouldn't have existed if his friend hadn't published it, hadn't gotten it published. But anyway, this was very intriguing. Again, a very thought-provoking story, and just the idea of this guy being put on trial and he doesn't know. They won't even give him the information. They won't even tell him why and what he did. And that's kind of disturbing, that they just arrest him and they won't give him the satisfaction of, and he has to try to, not let them win. Like at one point he loses temper, but, it gets mad, has to fit, and they just, to them it looks, it just proves you're guilty. If you're that angry, you must be that angry because you don't want to get, and he has to learn to, not lose his temper and not look bad in front of the court. And it's also interesting how all these people he encounters are somehow, involved in the court. I mean, even he's forced to talk to someone that is the court artist, the person who draws and paints the portraits of the people of the court, the judges. And that's his only comfort, is asking this guy how to deal with these guys, how best to, survive. And like, I read his tone, the court painter's tone towards our main character as like I feel like there was still that little bit of doubt in his mind. He's like, okay, sure, well, if you're innocent, like you said, if you're innocent, then. So I almost think there might be a sense of some of these characters don't think he's not innocent. Like they doubt his innocence, because they're like, why would you get arrested by the court unless you're guilty? And they don't consider that, well, maybe it was not, maybe he is innocent and they got the wrong person, or like they just don't like him or trust him, or maybe these courts aren't great people after all. Maybe they're not, their government is wrong and unjust. But anyway, yeah, so I'm looking forward to reading some more Kafka, and like I said, I want to read Metamorphosis again. And actually, this isn't a totalitarian regime. Reading the back description reminded me of that. Stop it. This was really good. Okay, and then so after that, another 500 plus page book that I finished in May was The Unconsoled, my second Kazuo Ishiguro read, and one that I've not heard people talk about, so I was determined to read this book. This is a concert pianist who goes to a small community in Germany, and his memory, and he's supposed to perform a concert, but his memory is kind of distorted and messed up, and he feels all these pressure to, please the people in this community. And he's just trying to prepare for this concert. His new wife and son are there, and he's trying to spend time with them. He loses patience with them, and it's a very messy, complicated situation that he finds himself in. And it kind of looks at his devotion to his job and how stressful his job is, and the struggle of that, and how he puts his job first over his family, and it's the consequences of that, and the consequences of fame, and everyone has all these expectations and puts all this pressure on you, and he just doesn't feel free and relaxed. And like, I think it looks at memory, and this Never Let Me Go looked at memory too, and how you may remember one thing, something one way, but then it might not be what you remember. So it very much looks at memory and trust, and can you trust your own mind? Are you remember things correctly or not? And there's also a dreamlike quality of this one. It's very surreal. Like, there's times when he is going about his day, and then all of a sudden he's doing something else. He's somewhere else. Just the transitions are really surreal and odd. And there's a fantastical quality to the story. And though there's no like magic or magical creatures or anything, there is a fantastical quality to this and what our main character is going through and how he's experiencing the day. And again, and then we also have these great characters. Like, our main character is such a fascinating person. You get frustrated, but you are intrigued with at the same time. I feel like there's really no antagonist in the story, just people wanting attention. And it's kind of a bittersweet read. It's very sad. It's kind of sad and everything, but it's also like I don't even think there's really a sense of hope in the story, because I don't know, but it's really good. I don't know if you would want to start with this one for Kazumi Shigeru, but definitely worth checking out. It is okay, and then let's see, after this one, the last one I read in May is Hood, a Robin Hood retelling. But what Stephen R. Larhan does is he puts in a different time and a different setting, and we have a different antagonist. So it's in Wales. And William the Red, I think, is the conqueror, so it's not Prince John. And the French have taken over, and our main character, Bran, he is forced to go on the run and abandon his people. But when he goes on the run and he tries to negotiate his freedom, his life is put on the line. He said, you have to get me, the people have taken over his kingdom are like, you have to get me this money or your life is forfeit. So he is forced to continue going on the run, and much to the dismay of, I'm just going to call her, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but Marion, his love interest. That's probably not how you're supposed to say it, but it's the name of the character in the Robin Hood legend. She's not too happy and very disappointed with him, and she's kind of trapped in prison, not in a traditional sense, but her father is loyal to the Count, who has taken over Bran's father's estate. And this Duke wants to marry her. And meanwhile, like, on his run, he gets injured and is found by this crone who takes him in and heals him. And through her stories and legends, she has to persuade him to take up the cause and not run from his responsibility, his destiny, and embrace his identity as the savior and as what she calls the Raven King. And he gathers a group of the remaining people of his fiefdom who are hiding out in the forest, and they prepare to try to fight the Count who has taken over. And it follows Robin Hood basically, but it takes different paths. And like I said, we have a different antagonist, and we have not met William the Red yet. So far, our two main antagonists are the Count and the Duke. Although the Duke doesn't seem as bad, and he seems charming and that he cares and wants to help people. And like the the father, the abbot who is living on that works for Bran's family. He's just trying his best to survive and take care of his abbey and everything, and he is kind of charmed at first by the Duke. The Duke says, "I will help you and, protect you from the Count." But then you quickly realize he's up to no good. You can't trust him. Like, there's something about him you don't, like, he's like pretending to be nice, which he's smarter than the Count, that's for sure. I think he's more, him and, or the higher up, the bishop, I think. I don't know if I'm getting the bishop and the abbot mixed up, because I don't know a lot about the church and the roles of the church and everything, but I think the bishop and the Duke I don't trust them. They're the more nerve-wracking villains, the ones that I feel like we gotta keep an eye out for. Because the Count, he's so, you can kind of predict him. He's predictable because he has a temper, and he's like a spoiled child as a villain, which those villains can be fun, because, those villains I do think can be kind of fun because you're laughing at them and their childish antics. I mean, like, they're a mix of fun and annoying, I feel like. Because sometimes you just get so frustrated, want them to go away and just can't stand them, but other times they can be very fun, because it's like, it's entertaining, almost. But, I do like how Bran was not automatically wanting to fight and thinking he was brave enough. He was not immediately jump to the hero role. He was very, he's like, I can't do anything. These guys are going to kill me. So what can I do? So I really appreciate that he was just a normal guy. He wasn't automatically a hero. He wasn't automatically ready to be a hero. He needed convincing. And he's still a very flawed character. And which is what's good about, like, I think people retelling some of these classic stories, like this one, like Robin Hood, or I currently just read Ramayana, a short and prose version of it. It's Indian epic. And, like, they make the character out to be so heroic and honorable and always doing the right thing. I mean, there's still aspects of them that you don't love. Like, there's a little sexism, or at least by today's standards, you can see it feels very sexist to us female readers. But they're mostly heroic, and they always do the honorable and right thing, and it's kind of nice to see modern versions of these stories where you show that, no, these characters are human beings who make mistakes. Even though in the case of Ramayana, he apparently is the reincarnation of a god, he's still immortal. So he's still flawed, or he should still be flawed. Which, now that I finished that one, I'm finally ready to read. There's another retelling that I have that I'm excited to read. Hopefully they will make the characters a little more flawed and a little less, honorable and good guys. And, like, I know now in the case of that, I'm okay. Yes, it's a fairy tale, and this is a folk tale. The original Roman is a folk tale. So, about heroes and villains and all that. And so, of course, they're going to be, like, good, and you have to distinguish the lines between good and evil. Who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? But it's nice to show these modern stories show that there's no straight lines. Sometimes the good guys make mistakes and screw up, and sometimes they're not ready to be the hero, to be the savior. And sometimes there's moments where the bad guys show a vulnerable side, or show a softer side, or show that they're still human, that yes, they have selfish, greedy desires, but they're also still people that, like, got corrupted, that started out weren't born evil. As my favorite character says on Once Upon a Time, evil isn't born, it's made. But yeah, this was a fun retelling. It is a trilogy, so this is the first book. So I will be doing to book 2, and then I gotta buy book 3, Tuck. And I also like their different take on characters like Friar Tuck and Little John. We do, we meet them, and they don't spell it out for you, obviously. Well, Tuck, he's still called Tuck, but Friar Tuck. But there's also, it's a different take on those classic characters. And they're also human, and make mistakes, and are not perfect, and are not as brave and heroic as the original story implies. But so that is Stephen R. Law's Hood, the first book in the Raven King trilogy. Okay, so then I read a book that I don't have a physical copy of, so I actually listened to it. I didn't physically read the book, but I did listen to it on audio via Libby. And that is Heart-Shaped Box by, what is his name? By, I cannot believe I forgot his name. It's Stephen King's son. But I don't want to refer to him as that. I want to refer to him as his name. For some reason, his name is escaping me. What is his name? I cannot remember. I cannot believe it's going to pop in my head randomly as I'm talking about this book, which in this case is probably good. But in this is unlike Pt2, this is his first book. Pt2 might be his sophomore novel. Because, I mean, he also did 20th Century Ghost, but that was a collection of short stories. So that came first. And then he wrote this is, I think, his first debut novel. So this is Junius Coyne is our main character. He's a aging rock star. He's kind of retired. He's living with his girlfriend Georgia, but he calls her Florida. And him and his manager find this item for sale on eBay that is this huge heart-shaped box. And the owner of it, this woman, says that the ghost of her stepfather's inside the box, and he is haunting her. So she wants to get rid of it. And she's trying to sell it. And miraculously, Jude bids and gets the box. He's rewarded with the box. And he finds out what's in the box is the suit of her stepfather, of this woman's stepfather. And he rather quickly discovers that maybe this woman's right and is haunted by the ghost of her stepfather because she sees this creepy man that no one else can see standing there with this gold chain that he dangles, and he's this creepy old man who keeps watching. And there's all this weird stuff that's starts happening. June starts to have these near-death experiences. His manager gets scared off because the ghost gets inside his manager's head and convinces him to kill himself. And his girlfriend, Florida, I got that wrong. Florida, Mary it's like Marianne or something is her name. And George is the name he calls her. Because there's a little quirk in the story that whenever Jude, the women that he hooks up with, he calls them by the state he met them in or where they were born or whatever. He calls them that so he can remember them. And so Georgia, I feel bad that I don't remember her first name, her actual name. Like, it's one of those two-person names, like Marianne or something. But Georgia is not sure if she believes Jude and thinks he just needs some help. But weird thing starts happening. She hears voices in her head, and there's encounters where she almost kills herself, and the ghost tries to whisper in Jude's ear and gets him to kill her and gets inside his mind and everything. And he slowly, as all this is happening, he's trying to figure out the deal with the ghost and everything, and finds out that this guy is a professional at hypnotizing people, putting up the front of, he's helping them, and people have died. People have killed themselves, and he tries to contact the woman who gave him the box, and it turns out that she is the sister of an ex-girlfriend of Jude's, whom he called Florida, and her name's Anna. Her real name is Anna. I feel bad that I can remember her real name, but not George's real name. And he finds out that Anna killed herself, and that Anna's sister blames Jude for it. And you piece together the whole story. You learn that Anna was depressed. She had a hard life growing up. Like, the stepdad was abusive and very controlling and manipulating, would use his hypnosis to sexually assault her and her sister, but her sister was kind of brainwashed into loving her stepfather and being very devoted to him, and she was even jealous of Anna. You learn that throughout the story, and so Georgia, realizing that this is real, that this guy is real, even though she can't see him, she's trusting Jude, they decide eventually to make a trip cross country to Florida to talk to the sister and convince her to tell them how to get rid of the ghost. So part of the book, the first chunk of the book takes place in Jude's home, but then in the middle of the book is a road trip where they're going to Florida. And this was such an unsettling story, and very intense and kind of creepy and just very unsettling. And I feel like if you think too much about it, it can scare you. And what's more disturbing is the antagonist. Even though, yes, in the present day of the story, he is a ghost, so he's a supernatural being with great power to hypnotize people, but he was a regular human being, a living, breathing human who believed in his own gravitas, believed in his own grand, he had ideas of grandeur about himself. He thought he was all powerful and he had a right of things, and he was very controlling, and it made it so scary that even though, now he's a powerful ghost who can do whatever he wants, it's scary that originally he started out as just a regular guy that believed in his own power, and that makes, I think, a little bit more scary, this antagonist. And he was so creepy. And this is the narrator of this book. I cannot remember. No, I can't think of his name, but I think he was the same Stephen Lang or something, I think it was. I think he was the same narrator who narrated Origin by Dan Brown, but he was really good at the southern accent and, really making it soothing and relaxing. But then later on, when Jude sees a vision of the past, this, I wish I remember the antagonist's name, his voice changes to a little rougher and really and more like rough and gruff. And the narrator did a really good job with that. And Jude is the main character. He's one that you don't love in the beginning because he's not the most sensitive guy. But then as the story progresses, you realize you kind of feel sorry for him, and you kind of start to like him or charm him because he does care. But he puts up this persona of I could care less, and this rough and gruff, and like he had a bad childhood growing up, so which doesn't just how he treats people all the time, but you kind of understand where he's coming from, why he thinks the way he does. And he actually was very likable, and you realize that he does care about Georgia and does really respect her and has affection for her. I mean, even the things that annoyed him about Anna, he actually found endearing at the same time. Like, and it was cruel of him to kind of abandon her, but when you have a partner or loved one that experiences depression, not everybody can I don't think everyone can deal with it. I mean, you hope that someone can deal with it and help that person, but sometimes not. You have to have patience and willingness and willing to really do the best you can to help that person. And it can be a lot to ask because not everyone's prepared for that, because this person, and not everyone can be sympathetic or empathetic to that person's suffering because you just don't understand it. And it's tragic, and it's something that they cannot control. You can't tell the person that, stop being all sad all the time, stop, get over it. You can't do that when a person experiences depression. And I know a lot of people will not like that Jude abandoned her, but he does feel guilty, feel terrible about it, and wishes he could take it all back and help her in some way, especially when he learns what the consequences of him abandoning her were and how kind of put him in this situation in the first place. But she forgives him, which I think is very important, to have forgiveness for someone. I mean, it's hard because not everything can seem forgivable. There are things that just don't always seem forgivable. And but she becomes a great help. And both her and his Georgia, like, I wish I remember her real name, but I don't. They're very forgiving people. They're very kind people, and they care about Jude, even though he doesn't always treat them with respect. He can be unkind to them. But yeah, I liked her. I liked Georgia. She was such a great, fun character. And I like that she was all like, didn't take Jude's crap, didn't let him, put himself down or anything, didn't let him get away with anything. And it was so good. It's such a good. It's intense. It's very dark. Like I said, there's talk of suicide. It's a dark story and has a lot of not so pleasant stuff. But it did not intend to be a happy story, or like a sweet story. It's a dark story. It also has these spirit animals. Although the way they're described, the shadows remind me of hellhounds a little bit. But they're supposed to be, they're familiars for Jude, and like, I like them, and I like, and I think also from what I've heard, like, I love those animals. And now there was, like, from Mike's book review, it mentions that there's references to old 80s rock music. I didn't get those references, so those kind of went over my head. But I still very much enjoy this story, despite the fact that it's a very dark, intense story. And there were times when I was very angry with the characters, not because they were bad characters, because they were good characters that some of them you just got frustrated with, or you downright hated. Audiobook was great. I enjoyed that. And like I said, I liked the narrator. He does a really good job with but yeah, so that one was good. And then, so the last physical book. Okay, well, the last physical book is another Filipino work of literature. And that is Lucia Strado by Miguel Shijuku. I don't know if I'm saying that. I have not heard how. I asked how it was pronounced. My dad would pronounce it because he studied Spanish. But I don't remember. So So this is a book. This is interesting because it's fiction, but the author kind of puts himself in the story. So the Miguel, the fictionalized version, he had a mentor. Crispin Salvador, who had just died. He was a writer. He has a lot of books, but the books are talking in the Philippines. Are very controversial. Not everybody loved him. He had a lot of critics, and he ends up killing himself. Although it's speculated, like, Miguel is not so sure. Wants to make sure that's true because he intends to write his biography. So Miguel is basically interviewing other writers in Crispin's circle that knew him, and Crispin's own mentor, and his I think sister, or tries to find a sister, or I don't actually know. I don't think it was a sister, but he interviews like one of his Crispin's old girlfriends, or lovers, and he also tries to track down Crispin's daughter. And he tries to find out all that happened. Well, while we're getting Crispin's story through him talking to all the people that knew him, we are also getting Miguel's story about how he and his siblings were raised by his grandparents. His grandfather was a politician. He wanted his grandson to be a politician. They didn't love, they didn't want him to be a writer, and they didn't love his writing. They were kind of disappointed with him and wanted him to write happy stories. And as I said when I talked about this book last, there's a big question of stories written for Filipinos and then stories written for everybody else, and that there's a difference between those types of stories. There's a discussion of that. And just the parallels between Miguel and Crispin's life, how they both had a daughter that they abandoned, that they haven't seen, and they tried to reconnect with Miguel in the present day. Crispin, before he died, he wanted to reconnect, but he was also too scared to reconnect with her. And also that they're writers, and not everyone, their friends and family, aren't not entirely happy with their writing, and they actually want to write the truth about the Philippines, what people want to sweep under the rug, what people don't want to talk about, because they want to write happy stories about the Philippines. They don't want to write about the darker side, the ugly parts. And we also get and this is also during the present day of the story, is also during a time of great turmoil and transition politically, and how there are riots. It's also, I think, during the rainy season, so there's floods. And at one point towards the end, there was a part when they were caught. Miguel and his current girlfriend are caught in a flood, and I was so nervous for them and thinking something was going to happen to them. Someone's going to die. And I knew it wasn't going to be Miguel. It was a very nerve-wracking situation reading that last chunk of the book, because it was like we were going back and forth between the past and the present, where they were caught in this flood and trying to get to, a secure location. So that part of that last chunk was very intense. And also there's one of my favorite scenes in the book was a scene between when he's asking two other writers and interrogating them about Salvador and asking them their thoughts on him, and do they think he killed himself, and they were just very opinionated and very judgmental of Salvador, and trying to be brutally honest with Miguel about it, but they were also kind of in their own little world with each other. And like Miguel had listed each of the books, what they thought of them, and each one, the two people were like, well, this book is, he's like, well, what about this one? It's like, oh, too much this or too much that. Like, they always had a reason to why it wasn't good and deserved criticism. So I thought that whole back and forth was kind of a funny moment. Like, it was a funny moment between him and the two writers. And just really pointing out the flaws in Crispin Salvador's mentality and what he wrote, and why people weren't happy with his writing all the time, where he received a lot of harsh criticism. But yeah, this again, a really good read, and it's just very, very intriguing read. And it did win a literary prize. It says right up here, which is too bad, because I think that prize stopped. Now, there is, I believe, other prizes for Asian literature, which, as a woman who's a quarter Asian, I'm very happy about that. And I feel like I do need to read more Asian literature, which is the goal of this project. And I want to start with the Asian that's in my blood, so. But yeah, this was really good. I very much enjoyed this, and what it got me thinking. So that's the last book I finished. So those are my books for the first half of the year. I hope you enjoyed both these videos. And I would love to know what your favorites. Do you have favorites yet for the first half of the year? Sorry, my nose is itching. We'll have to know what those favorites are. Are there, what have you read so far that just really got you excited, or really intrigued you, or inspired you, or really you had strong emotions, or just had a good time with? Would love to know what those books are. And if any of these books that I've talked about that I said were my favorites, did they intrigue you? Any of them interest you? Or have you read any of them? I'd love to know. And this goes for my first video as well. So if I don't mention that in my first video, because I was trying to finish the first part before I, before I got interrupted. But these questions apply to that one. So, if you have answers from that video, You can put them here if you've already watched that one. And I will talk to y'all later. All right, bye.